Hello, welcome. Today we're here to talk with one of our local heroes for 2020. Many of you know that in 2017, in May, the Brattleboro Select Board voted for Brattleboro to join the Charter for Compassion. If you don't know what the Charter for Compassion is, it was started by Karen Armstrong, who was a nun and now is a writer of many books on all kinds of religions. And she decided that rather than just talk about religion, she wanted to see what would happen if people actually walked their talk, no matter what religion they have. And so she started this Charter for Compassion. There are cities and towns all over the world who have signed on to this charter, who've committed to working toward building compassion in their communities, and as importantly, for linking with other communities that are doing the same work. So today, we're honoring someone who not only operates full steam out of a sense of compassion, but also connects locally with other people doing the same thing. I'm so honored to be able to introduce Tom Green. So Tom Green is receiving this award for many reasons, but most of all for his work with Ediblerattleboro. So I'd like to have him briefly tell us what Ediblerattleboro is. Then we will hear from him about why he got into this work. And then we'll talk a little bit more about other people and how he's working broadly in the community to build compassion right here in Brattleboro. So Tom, what is Ediblerattleboro?
Ediblerattleboro is an organization dedicated, I'll give our motto, which is grow food everywhere for everyone. But that's really only a part of what we do. That is the garden part. We have a variety of gardens, or we call them edible spaces because you wouldn't recognize some of them as gardens, where anybody can come and harvest the produce that we're growing there. There are fruit trees at the schools. We have 2 big gardens. There's adopt-a gardens further out in the community. That is the main basis. As part of that, we also teach gardening and teach soil regenerative practices as we garden. And Ediblerattleboro also sponsors the Share the Harvest stand, which gives away free produce every Sunday morning at the Turning Point Garden. And we conduct cook and eat experiences, we like to call them, for great vegan dishes. We're about vegetables and eating vegetables and getting better nutrition from them.
So Tom, before we dig into more of Ediblerattleboro, I hope you get my drift, I'd like to just talk a little bit about you and what motivates you. I have known you for a long time. You were for many years a very enthusiastic teacher of middle school science, and as part of that, you had a community garden in Springfield, Vermont. But before that, there might have been other things that have influenced you. So what has given you your motivation and your enthusiasm for this work?
Yeah, I have 4 main motivations. There's lots of little ones along the way, but the first is that I was born white, male, 1954, son of a rising corporate lawyer in the pharmaceutical industry in Princeton, New Jersey. And if you're a poker player, that's a 5-ace hand. You can't lose with that. So I was born to a life of privilege. I've enjoyed it. It's been very fine and good. I don't regret it, but I do feel that it leaves me with some obligation to share with people less fortunate than myself some of my time and talents and energy to make a better community and make some people's lives better. The second motivation is church. My pastor Lisa sitting opposite me here, the Guilford Community Church, progressive Christianity that really, I get down like the rest of the human race, and church is the place I can go and get recharged, get my hope rekindled, get my strength rebuilt, get my courage rebuilt, and always get challenged that there's more to be done, and you feel better now and you can go out and do things with that spirit in you. The third thing is Brattleboro itself is an amazing town. I've lived and worked in quite a few places, and this town is filled with positive energy, heroes of all kinds. Some of them are paid, some of them aren't. Some of them are sung, some of them are unsung, but there are people in this town who are really trying to make things better for everybody and for the whole community. And I don't see how people could live in this town and not be volunteering at something, because the inspiration is just there from so many people putting forth so much positive energy. So I wish to be a part of that, not stand to the side of it. And the fourth thing is the Ediblerattleboro crew themselves. It's a great community that I really enjoy. Very funny, intelligent, hardworking people that I would not have met otherwise. And so that being part of that little community that we are together is a great motivator to get out and do things.
Thanks, Tom. So all these things are motivators for you. I, perceiving you, see you operating out of a place of compassion. Would you receive that mantle? Do you feel like there's some aspect of what you're doing that builds a sense of compassion in you or in other people? Do you feel that we're right to honor you with this award?
Probably. I think so. I tend to be I thought compassion kind of is another face of empathy. And I'm pretty empathetic with people and their feelings and their circumstances. And have learned many times through my life not to judge a book by its cover, and not the famous expression is don't judge another human being till you've walked a mile in their shoes. And I always keep that one tucked in my brain really well, that you've got to be gentle and friendly with people first, and not until they give you reason to be otherwise. That's what you keep doing. So.
I'd love, if you would, to have you talk a little bit. I know we aren't going to use names, but I'd love to have you talk about your work at Great River Terrace, because that's been a really special coming together of a lot of the different agencies here in Brattleboro for people who were terminally homeless and that aren't homeless. And you have, I remember still, you coming and telling a story or two about how exciting it was for you to work in that place. Would you mind just telling us a story or two about that work?
Well, what you're right, it was a collaborative effort between Ediblerattleboro and Wyndham Windsor Housing and Groundworks Collective, because they're the two agencies that constructed and manage Great River Terrace. And early on, we started talking with somebody who had the authority to talk to us about starting a garden there, really before the place was officially built. So we went and held meetings with the residents in the winter and early spring of 2019. And somewhat late in 2019, we started building a small 2 8-by-3-foot beds garden up there for the residents to have free harvest out of in the future. And I have to say that it's worth telling this, because in the beginning I was concerned when we first arrived to do the work that there weren't people sort of pouring out the doors to greet us and help us get the garden done. And I wondered if it was really going to happen. And then word got out and people did show up. And again, I met new people that I would not have met in any other way. And they are tremendous and have really dug in to help us run this garden and keep it alive over the last couple of years. So
That's so
time
great.
to go harvest potatoes up there soon.
Yeah, potatoes, huh? All right, so let's have a little bit of the story of Ediblerattleboro. So you have told me the story of. I'm not sure I have the story right, but how did you first find out about it? What tweaked your interest? What made you get involved?
Well,
I'm thinking other people might want to do the same. So give us a little.
Well, it was founded in 2015, I'm going to say, at some point. And Marilyn Chiarello, was inspired by a TED Talk. I can't remember the name of the woman, but it's about the exact same concept in Todmorden, England. Very similar demographic to Brattleboro. And she got inspired to plant the first Help Yourself Garden, and the co-op immediately signed on to provide the land for it. And there was a little tiny, wasn't even an article, it was a photo of Marilyn and the founding mamas, we call them, 4 of them, around a little tiny 3 by 6 foot bed on the ground at the co-op garden, and it said what they were doing. And I've loved to garden all my adult life, and I did develop this the school garden up at Riverside Middle School in Springfield, and so I was still working at the time, but I knew retirement was nearing, and I said to my wife, I said, when I'm done, I'm going to find these people and join them, because that's what I can do and do well. So, and I liked the idea of providing help yourself gardens, walk in and harvest if you need it. So that had great appeal.
So I love that idea too. And I'd like you, if you would, I know you named the different places where there are some gardens or trees or things like that. One of the things that may not be clear to people is that the Ediblerattleboro includes not only the gardening, but also you can harvest, and then you are taught how to cook these things. So it's a sort of continuum of eating pleasure, whether you like to dig in the dirt or just cook and eat good food. And that's open to anybody, right?
Absolutely.
I could go down to the co-op.
Absolutely.
I, right now, could go to the co-op, pick a piece of kale and take it
That's
home.
about
with
what's left. Yeah,
I'm sure I chose that. The frost has come, so the tomatoes are gone. But I could do that and take it home and share it with my family. And
absolutely.
so
everywhere.
good food for everyone. Was that the thing that you said?
Grow food everywhere for everyone.
Everywhere for everyone. So let's talk about the everywheres. Let's walk through Brattleboro, and you point with me what has been planted by whom and why it's edible.
Well, I'll try to name them all. There's 13 that I know of if we count the 3 schools separately. So right out here in front of the municipal building are cherry trees that were planted this year. We tried to plant 3, 2 have made it, but we'll replace the 3rd one next year.
And you can eat the cherries? People will be able to walk by?
In 6-7 years, you'll be able to eat the cherries. These are fruit trees that were planted in their 2nd year, so they'll take time to mature and produce a sufficient amount of fruit that people can really harvest. Not far away in the back entrance to the library is one of our cattle panel arches on which was grown peas this past summer. I never actually got back there to see the peas on it, and it's stripped now, so that's another small one.
So people could go get a book and on the way out pick a pea and pop it in their mouth.
I don't know what they did with all the peas, whether there was talk of harvesting them and making a meal to serve to people somehow, but I'm not sure what's become of that. I haven't been back in touch with my contact there to find out what they did. We talked about Great River Terrace, the gardens out there, and the 2 main gardens that the main crew of Ediblerattleboro actually waters and weeds and takes care of. One is at the back edge of the co-op parking lot, and some people will still be surprised to hear that, but please walk out there if you're at the co-op and take a look at it. That's the mother garden. That's the first one. And the other big one is over at the Turning Point Recovery Center, a 2-tier garden, and people don't know that. They see some of it from the road right in front of the building. There's a whole upper level where this year we grew beans and perpetual spinach and scallions and kale. So
and who eats from it? Do people,
people walk in and harvest, yeah.
They really do.
Those 2 main gardens are seeing quite a bit of business of help yourself. And that took a while. We had to put up good signage, and when we're working them, I actually bark out at people and say, come back later and get the tomatoes. And they're going, you mean just take them? And I say, yeah, just take them. That's why we're doing this. So I'll be hoping the word spreads amongst people. And we've been there enough years that people know what's going on and see it. This year we also put in a little 2-bed horseshoe bed, which is one of our trademarks, up at the Mountain Home Park. And that's primarily for the residents up there. That is thriving pretty well. This was a big year for starting new beds in places. We planted a couple of cherry trees at an academy school, which I have yet to see. I wasn't part of the doing of that. And the Root Social Justice Center, we made a 10 half-barrel garden last year, and then we expanded that with these these are called wicking barrels. You don't have to have soil beneath it. They're right on top of pavement, so they're giant container gardens. And we expanded that one mightily this summer. Oak Grove School and the Green Street School both have Asian pear trees, which are actually producing fruit already. We planted those last year, a little bit of fruit, but they'll come on strong in the next couple of years. I'm missing something important, and somebody's going to get mad at me about that.
You're sounding a little bit like a Johnny Appleseed of planting things here and there that later generations, or later in the summer at least, people will be able to eat.
The model from Todd Morton, England, and their website, I think, is linked on our website, and you can go see it. They started this 16 years ago, and it took off. Every sort of institution in town, the policemen have a garden in front of their station, the firemen, the hospital, the library, everybody in that town bought in, and they have, as I say, it's a very good match for Brattleboro demographically in terms of size, former industry that sort of went down, and agricultural that sort of wasn't as strong around it. So people just bought in, and we're definitely not at that level yet here in Brattleboro, but we keep every year expanding a little more, and more people are coming up to me saying, so what is it you really do? Which is a good sign. They know that we're there and that we're doing something. So,
well, it's interesting to think of food as being a form of compassion. You know, we think a lot, or I think a lot about homelessness, but what if you are hungry and you don't have means, and there is a garden there, and you can reach down and pick a potato or pick a piece of kale or a tomato, and it's as if the whole town is saying, eat. You know, it is.
That's the idea.
Yeah.
And we hope someday that it really is widespread, so people could, all you have to do is grow a tomato plant if you want to join us. We're at a position now where we are picking up what we call adopt-a-gardens. For instance, the fruit trees are going to be managed by the people of the municipal center. In another year, the library one is managed by library personnel. Great River Terrace has workers out there that take care of that garden. We can't cover all of them adequately, so we have
so I bet people are asking, how is this paid for? Where's the compassion come in the form of funds?
Several grantors. We have one individual grantor here in town, whose name I wish I could mention it now, has given us a lot of money for fruit trees and perennial edibles that he wants to see planted. But our biggest, we got one grant from the Vermont Community Garden Network. We just picked up one from CNS, who's going to help us hold canning workshops in the month of October out at the Retreat Farm. And our main grantor for the past few years has been NEGEF, the New England Grassroots Foundation for the Environment. And they've really been a big boon to us, and this is the kind of thing they like to sponsor, so we sort of fit their categories of helping people.
So I want to make clear to people who are listening that there are many hands and many helpers, and Tom is always the first to say this, but it's also important to acknowledge that he does about 80% of the building of these gardens.
Well, I won't say that I coordinate
okay,
it, but
you
I
coordinate.
do a lot of it also.
So when we think about compassion, everybody has something to contribute, but some people are heroic in the fact that they're willing to coordinate other people. And that's one of the reasons why we really want to recognize Tom, is that he's the engine. You can see he has an organized mind, he has a vision, he's enthusiastic, and as he says, you can be walking by where he's digging in the garden and he'll say, hey, come eat. He doesn't say, hey, come get on your knees and shovel with me. He wants people to share in this. And I think that in itself is a compassionate act of really understanding what people can and can't do. So I know that I join with others. For those of people who don't know about the Charter for Compassion, and I did start at the beginning by talking about it, is it was initiated here by the Interfaith Alliance of something that would go beyond religion, and certainly food is something that's pretty wonderful in that way. So Tom, we're supposed to be talking about compassion. Would you like to say anything more about just compassion, or speak to other people about how they can think about making Brattleboro a more compassionate place?
Well, as I said before, I think there are many people in Brattleboro making it a compassionate place every day. It's a vibe of this town, and I say that in comparison, I'm sorry to say, to some other towns that I have known in my life. And I know of towns where when things aren't going well, the first question is, who shall we blame? And here in Brattleboro, the first question is what are we going to do? And usually a committee gets formed and work begins. And that's the nature of Brattleboro. And I encourage everybody to get involved at some level, no matter how minor, in participating in that world of compassion that I think really exists in this town. And I think there are a lot of other organizations besides us who welcome people to volunteer and help out in small ways, just a little bit, any way they can. Compassion, I think, is just understanding. I think I said this to Lisa just before we started. There's a famous expression that I won't judge another human being until I've walked a mile in their shoes. And I think that's an approach to life that is very worthwhile taking. Before you're going to put somebody down, dismiss somebody, get mad at somebody, you better think first about what their life is like and what brought them to be before you. If they're irritating you or worrying you in some way, you might want to try first being friendly and understanding and helpful before you take any other turn than that. And I think I think it's built into most human beings to be empathetic and to think of what's troubling other people. As I said, I've lived a pretty charmed life, and I have a lot of space for that. That's fortunate for me. And I was brought up to do that in many ways. So,
is there anything else you'd like to add? I guess, how do you see that compassion?
I think that the compassion is obviously in the giving away of food. We aren't making a great dent in I take that back. The Share the Harvest stand does really provide.
Oh, talk a little bit about that. I had not heard about this. This is something that's at the farmers market,
Share the
right?
Harvest was
11 to 1 on Saturdays.
Started 3 years ago. We send a crew to the farmers market at the end of the day, right at 2 o'clock as it's closing, go to their booths, to the farmers' booths, and set down big plastic tubs and say, if you've got anything for us to give away tomorrow, we'd love your help. And the farmers are preposterously generous. It's quite something to see. We've added to that this year of people with their own local gardens who have produced more than they can eat can come down to the Turning Point Garden at 10:30 on Sunday morning and drop off their surplus produce. The stand, and this is really a nice stand, this year was different because of COVID, because everything's different because of COVID. But in a non-COVID year, there are actual shelves of produce and people can pick what they want. We ask you to take whatever you think you can eat. Sometimes we try to get up a few recipes if it's something interesting like a whole bulb of fennel or something you might not know what to do with. And it runs from 11 to 1 o'clock. It's on a tight time frame on Sunday morning into Sunday afternoon. That also has picked up word of mouth business, and so it tends to run out by 1 o'clock or even a little short of that time. Sometimes there's a big white canopy, and you really can't miss it. If you walk down Frost Street or Flat Street, you'll see it there.
Gosh, I know that there's some statistic now that 1 in 10 families in the United States right now is hungry. I would just love to think that anybody in Brattleboro who needed food would have what they need, and it sounds like you're contributing to that. I just want to thank you so much, Tom. I think we're about to wrap up unless you have something more to say. Would you like to add anything more?
I'll just say again to everybody, find your niche and get into it with other people. Even in the time of COVID, actually gardening in the time of COVID in a group has been allowed and has been quite a bit of fun. So we happen to have the sweet spot. We're not indoors and we can be out there talking to each other and getting things done. But if you are interested in joining us, we always have room for more hands. It's seasonal. We're busy in the spring. We'll be busy again in just a couple of weeks as we start striking the gardens. And I should mention this, we are on the path to constructing, we were getting a free hoop house greenhouse frame from a local farmer. And we're moving it in here somewhere. The problem right now, we're a little hung up on the actual location. At the Retreat Farm, this is going to be re-erected there and will be a community greenhouse of sorts. It's not going to be quite as wide open as the gardens are, but we don't quite know how access to it will be allowed and controlled in any way, but people will be able to start plants. So this is something, and we're going to need some helping hands if we get it up this fall. So I'll be looking for people for that. But that's the next big exciting phase. It'll be the biggest single project we've ever done. So
So you're just rolling right along.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
November is when we get to start breathing again. So
Yeah. Well, Tom, on behalf of the town of Brattleboro and the Charter for Compassion, I would like to thank you and make you and proclaim you a local hero from the Charter for Compassion. You certainly deserve it. And thank you for coming in to talk to us about your work.
already.